You're listening to the Oh Crap Potty Training podcast, and I am your host, Jamie Glowacki. I am the author of Oh Crap Potty Training and Oh Crap, I Have a Toddler. So today I want to talk about something I call parenting for the moment, but not for the future. And this is coming up a lot in not only my potty training work, but all the Oh Crap consultant potty training work. And this is doing the thing that takes care of whatever the problem you have in the moment, but has no forethought for the future. Now, I don't like future tripping. I don't like to trip out about like what's going to happen next week. Or, I always warn when you're potty training, say over a long weekend and your child has to go back to daycare, if you start on that Friday, you can't future trip about your child going back on Monday or Tuesday. You have to stay in Friday. You have to allow the process to unfold. But there are currently a lot of parents who are putting up barriers to particularly night training, but we're finding it in the course of all parenting. So this is /parenting /potty training. It's not all potty training, but it is showing up a lot in our potty training work. So one of the big things is a sleep sack. Sleep sacks are great. If you have a sleep sack, that's awesome. But we are now seeing 4-year-olds in sleep sacks. And maybe they can get themselves in and out of it. Maybe they don't think of it, but the parents are saying, I can't get rid of the sleep sack. Night training is going to be incredibly hard for your child if they have to get themselves out of a sleep sack or call you to get them out of a sleep sack. Remember, your child needs to be night trained by 3.5, 4 years old, okay? If they don't, they have a 50% higher chance of becoming a bedwetter because the muscles that are formed in the bladder aren't used to holding and consolidating, and the bladder is being fully formed in that time. That is from the Pediatric Journal of Urology. That's not me. That's not anecdotal. So you really want to attend to it before 4, but parents aren't. And they're saying, well, I can't because the sleep sack, my child needs the sleep sack. Any transition your child goes through, whether that's weaning, whether that's sleeping in their own bed, crib to bed transition, those transitions, they are going to be uncomfortable. They're going to be uncomfortable for you and for your child. They require work. Moving from the crib to the bed means your child can now get up. And parents are delaying this. I rally against this all the time on this podcast. Parents are delaying that later and later till the child is practically climbing out of the crib themselves. Or maybe they're not. But they're also, in the same breath, expecting that child to self-initiate, to hold their pee, to act their age and their level of potty training. But a child who needs help getting out of their crib, which for all intents and purposes is a cage, right? We are caging the child in. That's why people keep kids in a crib. If they need help doing that, if that's the first thing you do, you're encouraging infantilism. You're encouraging your child to stay dependent on you, and yet you're asking them to independently play. You're asking them to be independent in all these other areas, but your actions aren't following through. Sleep sacks fall under that category. So more and more parents are saying, I can't give up the sleep sack. You don't have to, but that will make this immeasurably harder to pee in the middle of the night should your child want to. And we always want to set it up so your child can do the thing we're expecting, right? If you expect your child to be able to pee themselves in the middle of the night, you have to set up the environment so it's that way for them. And a sleep sack is counterintuitive to that. What a lot of clients have done in the past is use that sleep sack and they turn it into a pillow, or there's services where you can get like a little stuffed animal made so that your child has the comfort of that fabric. It's near them, but they won't be in the sleep sack. Another big problem we're running into, again, specifically for night training, is bottles. We're hearing about 3.5 and 4-year-olds still having bottles of milk. Now, this is like, again, I've rallied against this before in other podcasts, but you can't expect a child, number one, to hold their pee successfully through the night if they're having 4, 6, 8 ounces of fluid as they go to sleep. And in the world of parenting, everybody does what works for their family. There's so many things that we could argue about, but we don't have to argue about this one. This is unilaterally, unequivocally the worst thing you can do. No, not the worst thing. Okay. There's a lot worse things you can do, but this is terrible for your child. It's terrible for their teeth, particularly if there's milk, particularly if they're going to bed with a bottle of milk. So we know this. Now, maybe your child's having a bottle before and you brush their teeth, which is infinitely better. We know that milk gets stuck in the gums, in the pockets when they go to bed with any other liquid but water. And that can contribute to bottle rot. You don't want this. But also 3.5, 4 years old, you guys, some kids are learning sight words. Some kids are picking up books and starting to learn how to read. They don't need a bottle. This is infantilizing them. And I know it's easy. And I know you're probably overwhelmed and burnt out and busy. Please listen to my other podcast, Oh Crap Parenting, because the last few episodes and the next few episodes really are about how to help ourselves get more time, be less in overwhelm. But if you're parenting from a place of it just works for the moment, you're going to get screwed later on. So other things we see in potty training, kids who are not willing to go into public restrooms. That is very common. That's very common in the beginning, especially because restrooms are loud, the porcelain, the steel, they like make the sound is called live. It like bounces. It hurts their ears. There's always a Dyson hand dryer, like right as you turn the corner, somebody activates it, scares the heck out of your toddler, flushing toilets. There's a lot of noises, chaos, and there's usually other people in there. So parents are just accepting that and not willing to do the work that goes into acclimating a child to public restrooms. This is also feeding into daycares and preschools or camps, other restrooms. So the way we fix that is when you are beginning potty training and you're doing that block 3, which is outings, short outings, right? You can start utilizing other restrooms, maybe just going to a friend's house and using their private bathroom, where the toilet is comfortable and they know the house. Then you go to some place that has a family restroom, like Target has them, maybe your library, where it's just one big restroom and there's not multiple stalls, not as much noise, not as much chaos. And then you can bring them into other places that maybe have 2 stalls or 3 stalls. I don't know. Maybe it's a hazard of my job, but every time I go anywhere, I kind of check in on a restroom and I'm like, oh, this would be really overwhelming for a little one at first, or, oh, this would be great for a little one. So maybe just do a little mental checklist as you're going of like, oh, I'll have to remember to go visit this bathroom. But some of this stuff takes practice and training. So we're expecting children to step up to the plate. Little guys, these kids are little guys, that I don't think potty training is too hard for them, but we don't give them half a chance sometimes, right? So you want to think of these things like if your child is struggling with something, you don't just accept it and do the thing, the Band-Aid that takes care of it in the moment, right? Yes, you can do that once in a while, but you have to think a little bit ahead and think, all right, well, when is this going to get better? So if your child is, petrified of public restrooms, do you think there's going to come a day where all of a sudden they won't be? Because that's typically not the case. Typically, we have to work through that. And there's always a way, just like with exercise, like if an exercise is really hard for you or there's some task that's really hard for you, we break it down. We scale it back. We say, okay, well, just do this. If you're starting to write a book, people always ask me, how do you write a book? And I'm like, just start with your ideas, start with the chapters, and then you can start filling in. But doing nothing doesn't write a book. Doing nothing doesn't get you the exercise. Doing nothing with your child, but the easy thing that takes care of something in the moment, that is in the moment parenting. And there's no forethought, again, to what's going to happen in the future. And that's how we get, I have 6 and 7-year-olds right now who can't use a public restroom or are in some sort of bad habit. This goes along too with the putting a diaper on a child to poop in upon request. So that is one of the most nefarious things that happens in potty training because parents are like, they don't know what to do. And I get it. You're overwhelmed. Your child's panicking. They're pee potty trained, but poop, they're struggling with withholding and they'll release in a diaper. So the easy thing is to give them that diaper. But when does that end? So I ask you to take a second, whatever you're doing, if you know you're kind of taking an easy way out, or it may not be. And when I say easy, I don't think you guys are lazy. I don't think this is bad parenting. I think this is a product of us being so overwhelmed by our lives, by our work, by parenting in general, that we are exhausted. And so it's a panacea. It's like, okay, just for the moment, just for the moment. But these moments turn into years, and then it becomes difficult. So those are the big places that I see things. Or, I talked about the crib to bed transition. Parents are petrified of that. They can get up. Listen, your kid can get up whenever they transfer to a bed. Whether you keep your kid in a crib till they're 6, when they get up, when they get to a bed, they can get up. So when do you plan on doing that transition? And I know I'm repeating myself, but I can't say it enough. There's sleep experts out there that are like, you should be keeping your kid in a crib till they're 4. That is insane. Not when we're expecting them to do all these other big kid things at that age, which is good and right and developmentally appropriate. But if you keep your kid in a crib, you can't expect that. So that is a transition that parents are petrified of. But regardless, you're going to have to teach your child how to stay in their bed, whether it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It doesn't matter. That teaching still has to happen. And I think we have this idea. Oh gosh, this reminds me, I should do another podcast on Oh Crap Parenting, because this was one of my earliest episodes. We have this idea that there's a magical age that things are going to happen, right? Like, for example, you may not be, cooking with your kid in the kitchen because you're exhausted. You just got home from work, and having a kid help in the kitchen is like a nightmare, right? I just saw a meme on Instagram that said, I want a British baking show, but every contestant gets a 3-year-old who wants to help. And I was like, I thought that was hilarious, right? Because, oh my God, it's hard cooking with a kid. So what do? We need dinner on the table. So we sit them down with YouTube Kids or a movie, or, go play, and we cook. And then years go by, and then they turn 8, 9, and we start expecting them to help, but they have no history of helping. And so they resist. They're like, excuse me, no, I watch YouTube Kids when you cook. That's what I do. That's what I've been taught. So we have to be a little cautious. And I don't want you guys to get like all up in your heads about this, but what we do to make our lives easier with our kids, when we take these easy solutions, because we just got to. And again, I'm not saying you're a bad parent. I'm not saying this is anybody's fault. It's more like it doesn't kind of occur to us, but you have to pay attention to these things because we're sowing the seeds for tomorrow. And again, you don't have to be like, oh my God, my 2-year-old doesn't pick up their toys. They're not going to be a capable adult. Like, I don't want you to future trip, right? I don't want you to get all wound up about that. But what you have to look at is this solving the problem, or does my child need help transitioning to this thing? Do they need help transitioning to a public restroom? How can I do that? How can I scale it back? There's probably other scenarios that I haven't thought of, but these are the big ones that are showing up in potty training. Kind of just like even picky eating is like, when do they get over this? If your kid's gotten down to 5 foods and 4 of those are sweet things, that's not going to get better with time. That's something that needs to be worked on. And so think of just scaling these things back, right? How can I get them into the bed? How can I get them into a public restroom? How can I get rid of the bottle? I've talked about this numerous times, but if you have a bottle of milk right before bed, the first thing you do is separate out the liquid from the container. So your child can have milk. They can just have it in an open cup. Open cups are best started at 6 months old. They have silicone cups for little ones, okay? You can start teaching open cup at 6 months old. That's Montessori. We know now that sucking on things like pacifiers and bottles cause dental damage. Yeah. And it's recommended to not go past 1 year old. But many, many, many kids have bottles now at, like I said, 3.5, 4. So when does this stop? Are you waiting for your child to make the move? And this gets into that like child-led, but at some point we have to be the adult and say, this isn't good for your teeth. This isn't good for your well-being. This isn't good, with the pooping in the diaper. This isn't good for other settings. It's October. I am flooded with kids getting kicked out of school because their parents give them a diaper to poop in. And then what happens is you can't always control when a child has to poop. The child has to poop during school and creates a ruckus, a panic, because they don't have a diaper to poop in. And so they get kicked out for not being properly potty trained. So that's heartbreaking, right? These kids are old enough to remember this. So just know that if you're doing something that seems like, okay, I have to do this because it just keeps the peace. Yes, it might keep the peace today, but when will that change? And I always suggest if you are making these major changes, don't jump in today. Make a plan when maybe you have a long weekend, if you're doing some sleep changes, so that you can have the capacity to maybe be dealing with a toddler in the middle of the night. This is going to happen. If you're, doing the transition from the bed to from the crib to the bed, do it when you have some time off so that you can deal with the multiple times your child's going to get out of bed. But what I really, really, really don't want you to be under the false premise that there will be a magical day when your child says, I'm done with this thing. I'll do it the way it's supposed to be done. That doesn't happen. We are always teaching. And so if your child is learning, I can't go to bed without a bottle of milk, that is just getting more and more entrenched. And this podcast episode, please, 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 this isn't meant to guilt or shame you. This is meant to just get your awareness on it. I understand entirely how exhausting parenting can be and how it is so tempting to just take the peaceful way out. But this is where we run 100 miles into a brick wall of bad situations because we give into the tantrum. We give into the crying. We give into the bottle at night. We give into all these other things that are just Band-Aids to really spend the time working through the transition and how to help your child. And I'm not saying this is going to be easy. Some kids are really tied to certain objects and they may need extra. And that's why I'm saying, allow yourself time. Don't do this on a weeknight when maybe they have to go to school and you have to go to work and you'll all be exhausted. Figure out maybe a vacation time or something where you can devote some time that's going to be chipped away at your sleep because of these transitions. Okay, that's all I got for today. And as always, I appreciate you guys. I love you for listening and for potty training your child in the developmentally appropriate age and for being potty training warriors. I know this isn't an easy milestone, and so I super appreciate the work you're putting into it. And I appreciate you listening. Rock on and have a beautiful day.